Hey, good morning. How are you today? How are things up in Colorado today?
They are cold, and we have a frozen waterer. So I'm going to be out laying in the snow after this is over. So if we could go another 20 extra minutes, that'd be great.
Okay. Is that going to get you out of something or what?
No, it just delays the inevitable, really.
Oh, I got you. You don't want to get out there. And what does that mean? I mean, you're on a cattle ranch. What is a frozen consequence of that?
The biggest issue is this is water for the horses because during the winter we've got a limited number of cattle on the ranch. But the horses are our tools we use throughout the year. And they've got automatic waters that have heaters inside of them that keep the water unfrozen. But when it's 10 below with the wind chill, there's only so much power that can go through those things. So they do require a bit of troubleshooting every now and then, and it's never when the weather's good.
Yeah, I mean, I lived I live in Cheyenne, Wyoming for about 5 years, and so I'm kind of familiar with that sort of part of the world. You're not far from there. I mean, as far as the plains and the wind and the cold, and it's pretty tough, harsh environment. I have to say, I mean, of all the places I've lived, Cheyenne, Wyoming was not my favorite place as far as weather's concerned.
If it wasn't for the great company we keep here on the ranch, I would tend to agree with you.
All right, Jeff. We met your wife, the folks here a couple of days ago, I think a week ago or so, we had her on, and great conversation. Can you give us a little bit of your background as well?
Yeah, I'm actually born and raised in Oregon, from a town in Oregon called Pendleton. I, oddly enough, did go to Colorado State University where I got a degree in agricultural business. And then I went to work for Cargill and a couple other big players in the ag industry and lived in Nebraska and Minnesota and Oregon and Washington. And then I was a sales representative for a equipment manufacturer out of Iowa and sold big processing equipment to people like Coors and Land O'Lakes and things along those lines. So I grew up near the ranching community in Oregon. We did a lot more stuff in the mountains back there. But in general, my career has circled around finance, business optimization, processing, operations, and things of that nature, even capital construction projects. So when you pair my abilities with my wife's abilities, she brings the science and the business or the acumen for the cattle side of the business. And then I end up coming in with, complementary sales skills, a big accounting background, and I do a lot of consulting in finance and other things. And we've both been exposed to a big part of the ag industry as a whole, whether it's cattle or pork or barley or beer or hay or whatever. So understanding all those value chains has really allowed us to make Colorado craft beef a more functional model rather than just pushing beef off the ranch.
What is I hear a lot about the agricultural side of agriculture, but obviously there's a financial side. I assume most people that get an ag degree, they learn by trial by fire on the financial side, I would imagine. But are there any kind of concepts that most people seem to fail to understand, or where do they fail financially? Most people that are ranching, I know there's a concern among ranchers that they're getting kind of the raw end of the deal from feedlots and processors and stuff like that. But what's the overall package, and where can they improve?
There's a few different things along those lines. The biggest thing that hurts commercial agriculture as a whole, whether it's cattle or grain farming or hay farming in Washington where they export the hay, is typically there's not a lot of innovation or business optimization that happens. So people end up doing things the way they've done it for a couple generations. And by the time they realize that they're behind the eight ball on the market's moved past them and they've become so financially stagnant they can't move and get ahead of it again. A good example of that, there was a ranch for sale not far from where I'm sitting here on the ranch today. And sparing you all the details, the way the math basically worked out on this big commercial cattle operation was you couldn't make the payment for the facilities on what the cattle side of the business was going to generate on that property. So you have to have other capital to come into this. You have to have other opportunities or other income off the ranch to supplement this, because saying, I'm going to go be a rancher, I'm going to go be a farmer with the huge amount of capital that's required is almost a non-starter. And that's in almost everything I've seen in agriculture. If it's almonds in California, or it's oranges in Florida, or it's dairy in Wisconsin, just the sheer math of where you need to get to and where you need to be to operate at a profit is such a barrier to entry financially that most people struggle. And where people run into issues in ag in general, as I alluded to a couple minutes ago, is they aren't being nimble. They aren't watching the market. They have a system, and that system has worked, maybe more years than it hasn't. But over time, a lot of big production operations end up doing is they end up actually selling their equity back to the bank to continue to operate until they're no longer solvent. And that is really a big issue that comes within agriculture.
Yeah, somebody's got to feed us. So what's going to happen if this continues? What is there a better solution, or is it going to be all corporatized, chemical-based food? Is that where we're headed, you think, or what's the solution here?
I don't think chemical-based foods will be the base. I do think they're going to grow in popularity for a while. The big thing that we're seeing happen, here's a really interesting data point from the real estate standpoint within ag. If you take the 40-year period of 1976 to 2016, real estate in downtown Manhattan, New York, had a 10x multiplier. So in 76, if you bought a place for 100,000, 40 years later, it's worth $1 million. That same time frame in good production ag ground, call it central Iowa or central Washington in the Yakima Valley, where they grow a lot of hops and apples and specialty crops. Those production ag areas have had a 16x multiplier. So some of the production ag ground is actually multiplying in value faster than high-end real estate in New York. For that reason, people like Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, and some of those people are investing in agricultural companies. And then a lot of the retirement groups, teachers unions, public money that's for retirement funds are buying up production land and letting people lease it. Because they're not so much worried about how much the land generates, they're worried about the appreciation. So it becomes an investment opportunity for other areas, and it really is cannibalizing the ag industry.
Yeah, I was going to say, if that land is valuable, is it valuable as agricultural land or just land in general for later business development?
Both. So, some of the best agricultural land in Colorado is up in that Boulder area or down by Parker, and Colorado Springs was a great area for, running cows, but it's close to town. So that land appreciated as ag ground until it became so desirable that people turned it into some other sort of development. And that's happening in a lot of places. So when we talk about the cattle ranch and how we operate as a business, we have to be more functional on ground that is, potentially less desirable, because the good desirable land that's in areas that are populated becomes too pricey to even make the business work.
Yeah, I know we chatted and you said that, 2020 has been a little bit of a challenge for, everybody for a number of reasons, but also there was a challenge with you guys with, keeping up with production, because a lot of people were requesting, more food because they weren't so sure about that. How did this year's sort of pandemic affect you? And again, this is the last day of the year. I just want to Happy New Year's to everybody just out there. But how did that impact you guys as Colorado Craft and maybe folks in different ways?
Mm-hmm. Well, the people we know that are in this space, whether it's, we have some friends that raise lambs, we have other friends that raise hogs. Everybody in general has had an easier go-to-market strategy due to COVID. So there's a lot of people that are beginning to sell direct to consumer, and a lot of consumers that saw what happened with the grocery supply chain that are like, wow, I need to know a guy. If I have a phone number and I can't count on Walmart, let's make that happen. So that's been really cool to see. And some of that is being optimized from a business structure standpoint, because FedEx and UPS are getting just slammed with people ordering from home. So that's creating some supply chain issues. From boxes and insulators all the way down to just getting packages delivered to people. And FedEx and UPS are so overloaded that new producers coming online that want to ship really can't, because they're not doing new contracts. They're just trying to, maintain status quo for a moment. For us personally, we were really fortunate. We had cattle in the pipeline. We had a little bit of a lag. COVID really hit in March, right between two pens of cattle that we were just about finished with. So we had a little bit of a catch-up time. Believe it or not, we were back ordered / oversold from March to November. November 10th, actually, we got totally caught up. Somehow we were able to work through all that back order logistics without getting blown up on social media. There were some people that canceled some orders because they couldn't wait, and we were, more than happy to refund those. But, as a group, whether it's MeterX or the rest of the carnivore and keto community, everybody was really supportive of us, really understanding of the issues we were facing. And we've come out of it. We've learned a lot. We actually built a new building at the ranch this summer so we can ship more expeditiously. And it's been interesting to see. We really feel for all the people out there that are struggling with it, and we've done what we can. We've donated product to people in the medical community. And actually, when COVID was, it's still running kind of a little crazy right now, but in the very beginnings of COVID, we had some medical folks reach out because they were quarantined and couldn't even go to the store. We had some elderly folks that said, "Hey, I can't go to the store. Can you send me something?" We were able to prioritize through that and help as many people as possible. And I got a few more gray hairs because of it. But, if you're a business owner, that's to be expected. And we're just grateful we're still here to help everybody. And business is going well. And, Generation 6 is getting closer every day to being able to pack boxes for us. So we'll see how that goes.
Generation 6 is your young ones, right? I assume, is that right?
Yeah, she's 13 months, so I have a little bit more time to wait. But one of these days, I'm going to teach her how to use a broom or maybe a shop vac. We'll get her a baby shop vac and just let her walk around. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll just have to. Hopefully, there's no child labor law violations going on there. But,
right.
So let's talk a little bit, because I met you in person. We've had a relationship for a couple of years now, and I've had a chance to eat some of the Colorado craft, and I really enjoyed it. But I met you in January last year in Nebraska. Jamie Seaman's little thing, one of the last live things I was able to do this year because of the COVID stuff. And you did a 30-day, 90-day carnivore deal. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I actually extended it to 120 days. Went straight carnivore for 120 days. Saved one cheat day when my father-in-law brought donuts over and we were all fixing fence. And after no donuts or nothing but carnivore for 45 days, a donut was a horrible idea. That thing hit me like a freight train. I had to go work in the heat just to burn it off. But man, it was life-changing actually for the most part. I'm still almost all carnivore, still doing a lot of intermittent fasting. The 120-day challenge that you I don't know if you can say you extended it to me so much as you posted it on Instagram, and through the court of public opinion, I had to. And I say that tongue in cheek, but, it was really helpful. Really appreciated the motivation. And, through that, I've been more active this year. I actually had a horse wreck in August. I had a horse fall down with me and we were shipping cattle, and had a class 3 separation on my shoulder. And believe it or not, was able to bounce back from that faster than I thought was possible. Even the doctor was blown away. Just a few weeks ago, got hit in the face with a gate. I've had kind of a rough fall myself. Had to have a CAT scan to make sure I didn't crack anything really badly. But within a week, that was totally healed up. So just, I'm getting older and I'm healing better now from, the random injuries or, working on the new building, framing things all day or doing electrical or whatever. I'm more mobile. I'm bouncing back better. I'm recovering better. And, I really believe that has a lot to do with the carnivore diet.
As somebody who's, obviously sort of grown up around or been in and out of the beef industry for your whole life, has the experience with that diet changed your perspective in any way?
It certainly has. I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'4", and I remember at one point I was about 260, and my mom told me I was thin. So I've got a large frame, not unlike yourself, and I've struggled with weight a long time. You try to lose weight, you go to the gym, and then I remember at one point I got the flu, and I'd been working out and doing really well, and I tried to run a mile the next week and was so beaten down, it just drove me crazy. So it's very disconcerting. And with that, you get a little disappointed. You're trying to find other ways. And I really think the carnivore diet, for me personally, is a great home base. If you're wondering, where do I go? Keto's great. We did keto for a while, and I try to stay mainly carnivore, but occasionally do drift into keto. With me, keto became a negotiating step. Well, I can have this, but then I can't have that. And it became very mental for me of how do I make this work? Where carnivore is a really simple true false question. And it's a way to get back to home base really easily without a lot of that mental judo of trying to figure things out.
But as far as the sort of I sell beef business, when I went and presented U.S. Cattlemen's Association in Billings, Montana, 2018, I stood in front of a whole room full of cattle ranchers, telling them, "You, our guys, have a health food that you sell," and most of them looked at me like they didn't really understand. They didn't believe that, or they were, because they had bought into the ideology that, you can only have a little bit of meat. Meat's kind of not that good for you in a large amount, and that was kind of revolutionary to some. I was just shocked that these guys were, didn't understand what they were selling was so healthy. And I guess it's the mass brainwashing we've had. But does that affect your approach to how you do business and how you, if you realize you're selling a health food product now, it's maybe different. Maybe you always thought that way.
We've always supported beef, whether it's from our ranch or from, other people within the community, because humbly, we couldn't feed all of Denver if we wanted to. So, we've all got to be in this together. And the one thing that we've always supported is, good meat, whole foods, things that aren't, processed in a huge facility. And then by facility, I mean, a noodle plant or something like that. Because in my previous life, I actually worked in flour mills and did things like that. But it really hasn't changed what we've said, because there's people like you in the community. Actually, I've got a gentleman you need to meet. He is a wheat farmer in Eastern Oregon, and I switched him to carnivore. And he's blown away, and people were telling him he was unhealthy. And he's like, guys, I grow the wheat. Like, if there's anybody that doesn't have a skin in this game, he's like, I'm choosing not to eat any of this processed stuff. And he feels a lot better. And that conversation actually came forward. He's a couple years younger than me. We went to high school together. Very good guy, but he quit drinking altogether. No beer, no anything. And he's like, man, I feel so much better. He's like, but I just feel a little, I think the word he said was just lethargic. Like, he's like, I just feel kind of flat. And I said, have you tried carnivore? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I told him, and he ordered your book the next day. And so when I can point to references like you and some of the other people in the carnivore community, it doesn't really change how we're doing business, but it gives us more opportunity to talk to people, because you don't own any part of Colorado craft beef. So if you're talking about beef is healthy, people have a tendency to listen to people like yourself. Rogan talks a lot about eating good food. So we don't really spend a lot of time in that space. When people come to us, they want to know about the product. And we're able to talk through that in a really good way that makes people feel good about where it comes from.
Yeah, and when you said, large processing facility like a flour mill, and I have, just assumptions about that. But what's the deal with that? I mean, is there some concern about the way that's done?
No, flour in and of itself is okay, but a flour mill is part and parcel going to become a noodle factory, right? I mean, Barilla Pasta in Iowa, they process the product there. They take the flour, they make it into noodles. And just that ultra processed food is something that we actually, even with Emma, we try to not let her have any of that, because, fruits, vegetables, she eats probably as much meat as anybody I've ever seen at that size. You'd actually be pretty proud of her when she has some peas on her plate and we put some steak on there. She drops the peas immediately and doesn't go back to them until the steak's gone. So, she's having a good time.
Yeah, that's a change. So we've just had a change in, Secretary of Agriculture. I guess Sonny Perdue will be out. Tom Vilsack will come back. And I think Vilsack was previously Secretary of Ag under Obama, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So he's reprising that role, and he's coming from, I think he had a private industry role before that. Do you have any thoughts on that? Does that affect you one way or the other? Or, is there any kind of political things that make your life either easier or better or worse?
We're still small enough that really doesn't seem to affect us too much. Colorado craft beef is a great little business for my wife and I, but actually, I don't know if you saw yesterday, they released the national numbers on the beef industry. So in 2020, 33 million fed beef were processed with an average carcass weight of 907 pounds. So the average carcass weight is, almost 6% higher than it was last year. And that's due to COVID, because some of those big meat processing plants got shut down, and then cattle got bigger, and then it just took that much time to get through that amount of cattle. The most interesting part of that conversation that we saw yesterday was, if we were to need that same amount of meat in 1960, with the way the industry has changed, to get the same amount of net product, you would have had to process 45 million cattle to get that today. So the industry as a whole is almost 25% more efficient than it ever was, in comparison to a 60-year time frame. So
yeah, that's something I've talked with guys like Frank Minlaner about. I mean, due to genetics and due to feed efficiency and just keeping healthier cows and calving better, and selecting the breeds to match the environment. We see other countries like Brazil has a herd of over 200 million. U.S. is something around 95 million. Yet we outproduce Brazil for beef. Just because of our production efficiency in the United States. Some people will criticize that. Some people will say, well, that production efficiency comes at a cost. It comes at these, large CAFOs, these, sort of maybe ethically compromised things. Maybe we're creating environmental hazards due to, resistant bacteria from antibiotics and unhealthy cattle. What are your perceptions on that sort of situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, much like you and Kara's conversation last week, she is what I affectionately call the cow nerd of the company. So I know just enough to be dangerous. But from my experience in the multifaceted side of agriculture I've come from, no side of any production chain ever does anything 100% right. So, I'll start off by saying the commercial beef chain could probably do some things differently. We could probably do some things differently depending on what metric you were trying to make perfect. But there's always going to be a trade-off. If you want to do all grass-finished beef in Colorado, you're not going to be able to. There's not enough land. There's not enough good weather. There's not enough green grass. The ranch is green in June and July, and then it turns brown again. So we're able to grow other products up here, hay, grain, things of that nature, that then cattle are then fed. So we're able to produce beef year round. So some of that trade-off when people want to eat has to be acknowledged, but we also can't make the decision that certain parts of the country just can't eat certain parts of the year. When it comes to large CAFOs, yeah, there are some, but if you look around where we live, there's a lot of cattle on feed nearby. Most of them are family operations. There's a 5,000 head feed yard about 2 miles east of here that's owned by a family. Most of the places around here are family owned. And to a certain scalability, you can't feed 500 head and make money doing it. You have to get big enough that the scale of economy pays the bills, so people will continue to do it. And with regard to bacteria, with regard to, things becoming resistant, that's really not my wheelhouse. I'm the money guy. But what I would say is that the ag industry in general, whether it's farmers, whether it's ranchers, whether it's whoever, we aren't out here trying to do anything intentionally underhanded. We're trying to do the best thing we can for the animals, or the best thing we can for the ground, because that is our livelihood.
Yeah, I think that's the sentiment. And I think, if we look at the cattle industry in the U.S., there's something 700,000+ independent ranches. Most of them are smaller family-owned operations. I mean, this is what the average, cow-calf operation, 50 head. That's the majority of what's out there in the U.S. And I think that's what many people fail to realize. My understanding is the beef industry, has still grown. Even in the U.S., I think the numbers are up a little bit. I think worldwide they're certainly going up. We hear a lot of projections from Silicon Valley saying we're going to completely get rid of the beef industry or the animal ag industry in total by whatever date they throw out there, 2030, 2035, 2050. Likelihood of that occurring, what do you think?
I would say that's got to be near zero. The almond milk industry thought they were going to do the same thing. And I'm not saying they haven't gained some market share, but at the end of the day, you can't create a ribeye with the same texture, the same flavor. And what are we going to do with all those people? The people that live on that industry, the people that manage the ground? What does it all turn into? Because the land is managed for those cattle. Do we just have huge roaming grasslands? I mean, I'm curious of how that looks. But more specifically, there was a really interesting talk. We were at the Idaho Cattlemen's Conference a few years ago. And in general, worldwide, there's 2 billion people that in the next 20 years are going to become middle class. Now, most of those people are not in the US. They're in Eastern Asia or other parts of the world. The first thing those people do when their social status changes or their income changes in a foreign country is they upgrade their protein. So the international demand for beef, I think, is going to actually go up over time. And secondarily, Kara did allude to the time she spent in Germany a few summers ago when she was in college. Both of the people she lived with in Germany were licensed veterinarians, educated in the US. And she asked them, what do you miss about the States the most? And they said, we miss a good steak. Because in Europe, bulls are not castrated. That affects the flavor of the meat. Animals are not fed and processed the same. So if you look around the world, a lot of people, the gold standard is US raised beef. That is the standard for a good steak in a vast majority of the world. So while I do think there'll be a little bit of disruption in the market here, I've also looked at the cost of production they have for some of the chemical meat or whatever we want to call it. Their cost of production, the cost of the facilities, we can still do better in larger areas raising the real thing on just a cost per unit.
I like that term chemical meat, because they like to say clean meat, which I think that term has actually been banned from using because it implies that beef that's somehow not clean, which I think is ridiculous. But I like the chemical meat. Mills are using that as a, instead of fake meat or schmeat or, whatever, that faux meat or chemical slop, but chemical meat. Interesting.
Well, and what's interesting is the big part of the Impossible Burger or some of those other systems is pea protein or some other sort of ag product that, peas are grown with a huge amount of chemicals because they're very susceptible to disease. They're very susceptible to fungus just because of how they grow, because when they grow, they canopy over, and that natural canopy traps a little bit of moisture in there. Soybeans are much the same way. So from a true ag standpoint, one trade-off begets another, because at the end of the day, we still have to grow food.
Yeah, there's speaking of soybeans, I got a farmer sent me a video, and he's a soybean farmer, and he sent me a video of him harvesting his crops and running his, at the grain, whatever, thresher. I'm not sure what the name of the thing is, but just showing all the animals that are out in the field, the mice, the rabbits, the foxes, the birds, all the varmints. And then, he's out there at night with his scope, shooting down wild pigs to grow the food. This is something that people think there's no animal death if you grow soybeans or whatever. But I mean, it's fascinating that the amount of chemicals that are required to grow a lot of these crops. Do you guys also grow some of the grain as well? I guess, is that what you're saying, like barley or something like that?
No, we do not farm anything. Since we live in the sand hills, the soil type we have here is not conducive to farming. So that's it. Over 100 years of living here, Kara's family figured out that the best thing here is livestock, and the best type of cattle to grow here are yearlings because they're not as big as mother cows. So the PSI of their feet on the ground doesn't tear up the root structure. There's a ton of just no pun intended, but head in the dirt research that's been done here. So we don't farm here, but I've got a lot of friends in the farming industry. And when we say a lot of chemicals, I don't mean a lot of chemicals. I mean, there's different things that have to be done in different areas for their environmental constraints. So when I was in Minnesota, there was a lot of soybeans around, and they had to use a product called Warrior. And that's what got rid of the aphids, because the aphids in all the humidity would live in those rows to a level that it would actually destroy the crop. But that stuff is all regulated. How do you put it on? And in all fairness, I forgot exactly who published this. There was a study at some point that if that the national farming average of, amount of whatever chemical per acre is significantly lower than what we use in our driveways to spray weeds or something like that, because we leave the concentrations way higher. And the guys that are applying chemicals, and mind you, I'm not a farming expert either. I'm a big fan of when it comes out of the field and then I take care of it from there. What they're putting on, is exceptionally expensive. So they are very, very cost conscious. And, much like the ranchers trying to protect our pastures, and, we don't put anything on the pastures, no fertilizer, no spraying of anything. I don't think there's been anything put on there in the last 100 years. Those guys are trying to maintain their crop, maintain their soil health, etc. So they're doing the very best they can with the chemistry available. And sometimes there's just areas of the country that require different things. And much like in the beef industry, I can't raise the type of cattle here that they raise in Texas. It's too cold. Their hide isn't thick enough. They don't put on enough meat. They aren't as well insulated. Where if we took cattle from here and we shipped them to South Texas in August, they wouldn't gain correctly. They're going to be really hot. If you look at some of the CAFO, the feeding operations in Iowa, they actually have misters and shades for some of the cattle because it's so hot and humid over there. So I guess all of that rambling is just to say that no matter what we're looking at in agriculture, it's very nuanced. It's very regionally specific. And by and large, I would say the agricultural community as a whole is doing everything they can to maximize their ability to continue their operation.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing I didn't think about is, because a lot of the cattle around the U.S., whether it's up in Montana or down in Texas, are shipped up into that grain belt, Kansas, Nebraska, to finish, because that's where the grain grows. And you got a cow that's acclimated to South Texas or wherever. I assume they've got if you're getting a herd of, Highlander cattle, and then you get a herd of Angus, black Angus, they've got very different temperature requirements. And so it's interesting how the feed yards would have to probably manage them differently, I guess. Is there something to that?
Yeah, there absolutely is. If you look at the map, Interstate 70 runs east and west across Colorado and Kansas, basically right through the middle of Denver. Anything north of that is northern cattle. Anything south of that is more southern cattle. That's actually a really weird defining line. Even how guys ranch, because you're dealing with mesquite trees when you get south of I-70 and you're dealing with more cactus, versus up here, we've got coveralls and other things we get to work with. Because the feeding triangle for cattle nationally is basically Amarillo to Omaha to Denver. So cattle are born north and south of I-70 all year long. They're moved around. But in general, I-70 is the dividing line in that feeding triangle. There's a huge majority of the cattle in the country are processed in that area. And of course, there are some exceptions, AgriBeef and Snake River Farms. Those guys are up in Idaho and Washington. But for the most part, that central part of the country is most common.
Yeah, so Colorado craft, that implies some degree of refinement on the finishing process, I suppose. What do you guys do a little bit differently than whatever the normal guy does to make it more? Because I whenever I get some of your stuff, I can always taste it. I like it, by the way. And your comment about U.S. beef tasting the best, I 100% agree, and I hope it doesn't piss off people in the UK and Australia and New Zealand, whatever. But I find U.S. beef to be the most palatable to my palate, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. But what are you guys doing a little bit different than other people? And maybe Kara might have been better, but I'm sure you have an idea what's going on. That maybe you don't give away trade secrets, but is there a way you approach the flavor process different than other people? Is it genetics? Is it all of the above? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so the word craft to us is our way of trying to integrate the chain. So in the beef sector, there's cow-calf operators, there's yearling operators, there's feeders, and then you have processors. And what we really wanted to do with Colorado Craft Beef is integrate that chain with people that do what they do well. As I mentioned, we can't at our ranch location be a cow-calf operator. It's just not a starting thing financially. We don't farm, so we don't have extra places for them in the winter. So we find cow-calf producers that we can buy calves from that align with our goals, that align with incentivizing the industry. They raise them the way we'd like them raised. We dictate health protocols. So then we bring them to the ranch. They go on pasture here for the summer. And then we do put them into a feeding operation with another partner of ours, another young guy, great producer, very, very intelligent. And he feeds them the way we want them done. You and Kara talked. She's got a master's in cattle nutrition. So I'm not going to begin to try to talk about her side of the house because I would certainly say something incorrect. But we source local products. We use different things in the grain industry from my background, whether it's barley or malt barley rootlets from malted barley facilities in the grain space, or it's flaxseed from another farmer nearby that's growing that as a subcrop with his garbanzo beans. So luckily we're able to source other things, mix that in. The gentleman that does our processing does a great job. The aging process is a big part of it. But I think the biggest percentage of it boils down to genetics and how they're handled just through the whole process.
Yeah, like I said, I just wonder because like I said, yours has a unique taste. I can always, it just tastes a very pleasant taste, by the way. But it's just I can always tell. It's kind of interesting how different some animals can taste. Beef can taste very, very, very different. Which if you don't eat a lot of it, you may not appreciate that. As far as the actual flavor rather than so much the texture. Somebody's asking about what does an acre of land run out where you're at there? If somebody wanted to buy some land out there.
Yeah. Where we're at, it's about $700 an acre. You can go 10 miles away though to the irrigated farm ground and it's $7,000 or $8,000 an acre. So it just depends on, on which side of the road you want to land on. Water is king. That farm ground with the irrigation, the reason it's so much more valuable is it carries a water right that comes out of the Platte River. So we're on dry land, native pasture that really hasn't changed since the Comanches toured around up here. So yeah, $700 to $1,000 on smaller plots. It just kind of depends.
My understanding, that's a pretty good price for running cattle. I think there's I talked to Greg Judy about people wanting to do it, and he said there's a cutoff price where if you pay more than that, you're going to really struggle to make it in the business. If you got to keep it under a certain amount. There's some truth to that?
Oh, absolutely. That's just a cash flow model. You can only afford so much money across the way for things to work out. So it's just a capital cost, right? It's everything we do. It's how big of a house you can buy, what kind of a car you can drive. It's you can only pay so much for land because somewhere that land has to be paid for, and the cattle are what makes that possible.
So how do you get water for your guys? I mean, you said you're on a dry salt. What do you call it? Sand hills.
Yeah.
Don't have water rights. Where's your water? Do you have to pay a bunch for water? How do you get these guys moisture?
No, everything we've got is on wells. We have one on the pasture right here at our house. We have one main water tank here that actually runs off of our house well. So we drink the same water the cows do. And we're okay with that. And then if you go across the section about 2/3 of the way across, there's a seep well that's probably been there since the 40s. It's on a solar pump. It pumps into another couple of tanks. So, and then across the ranch at other parts of the ranch that Kara's dad actually operates, everything's been converted to solar. We did have some windmills. The last 2 windmills were taken down this summer. So everything's all on solar pumps now.
What do you guys, as you project forward into the next 5 years or whatever, do you guys have any projections on what you're going to try to do with are you going to try to expand the herd, or what is that just limited by how much land you have? Do you buy more land, or what's a 5-10 year outlook for you guys, or do you know?
You mean other than hitting Powerball and moving to Scottsdale, where you don't have to defrost waters in January? We're gonna keep doing what the market asks us to do. We've got some plans for growth. The biggest hinge pin for us and everybody else in the custom space is processing capacity. So how many cattle can you get harvested at a certain time? And we are scheduled out to the end of 2022 right now with processing dates, because our processor called us and said, "Hey, we're scheduling 2022. What do you need?" And that's the biggest thing we're running into, and that's people across the country. We've gotten calls from people, "Hey, when can you kill my or harvest my animal?" I'm like, "We don't do that." They're like, "Oh, well, where do I do that at?" So that's really put a big damper on the system, and the USDA system around that is really constraining the market in that spot.
Yeah, I mean that has been a topic of a lot of discussion this year due to COVID, and seeing that bottleneck that's occurring, and everybody's it's gotten the attention of several state attorney generals and senators, and there's been some legislation proposed. Do you feel that any of that's going to make a difference in the near future?
Maybe. What I see the biggest bottleneck being is the right of inspection that some of these small plants get from the USDA. So the USDA grants a right of inspection to a processing facility, and that processing facility doesn't pay for that. That's the real hinge pin here from just a financial incentivized system. They get a right of inspection of 40 hours a week or whatever it may be, and they don't pay for that. They don't pay a bill to have that. So if another processor says, "Hey, I need a right of inspection," the USDA is not getting income for that. So the USDA has a finite amount of money they can contribute to USDA inspectors. That actually pins the market where it's at, unless USDA gets more funding or unless they change the model. In my former life, if I was building a huge subdivision in Washington, the governing body of that area, whether it was the county or the city, charged you for their inspectors. They required you to be inspected. They required all the construction inspections, but they made you pay for that inspector. The fact that the USDA doesn't do that is very odd to me. And until they change that model where you can say, "I want another inspector, how much does it cost?" And you can pay that, and it becomes a capitalized commercial system, I don't think we're going to get a lot of change. But on the flip side of that, if you talk to anybody on that side, finding people that want to go in to be an inspector at a beef plant isn't exactly a line. There isn't exactly a line out the door for that. And there are a lot of folks that have talked about putting up new processing facilities. Those are exceptionally expensive to build. They're really heavy on the regulations, especially on new facilities, because you can't get coded in on some old design that it's okay. Secondarily or more primarily to that is, where is that facility going to be located? How do you get the labor? Because it's not a glorious thing to work in a harvest facility. The type of people or the type of folks that work in those facilities sometimes don't last long. And if you're in a small community, you burn through the labor pool in a couple of years, and then what do you do as a business owner? So there's a ton of things that are pressing on that side of the industry. And the way that actually funnels back into, the flavor and process of our beef, we age everything for 3 weeks. You can't do that in a commercial plant. JBS and Cargill have huge facilities here in Colorado. They process 5,000 animals a day, 6 days a week. They basically get them down to temperature, they fabricate them, and they ship them out the door. They're in there 4 days. Our whole carcass is hanging for 21 days before they're broken into steaks, and that changes the facility or the profile a lot.
Oh, maybe that's part of the process, that you can taste in there. I wonder, there's some people talking about, the state inspection, the state-run facilities, which I guess restrict you being able to sell across state lines. They have state inspectors, and some people say they're at least as good quality, perhaps better quality than the USDA inspectors. Is there any thought in using state-level inspectors?
I think that could be a functional model. However, not being able to ship across state lines really constrains you. I would venture that more than 60% of the product we sell goes out of state. We send a lot of product to California. We send a lot of product to Florida. Believe it or not, we send a lot of product to Texas. You would think they'd have their own people down there. and I think that becomes the big deal. If you want to be local in a certain area, that'd be great. But most of those areas, especially like where we're at, I could probably list 10 competitors off the top of my head. They're within 100 miles. So we're pretty saturated because we've got a lot of cattle here. We've got a lot of processing capacity here. But if you go to central Iowa, the numbers are a little different, and it's only a one-day truck ride to there. So I think state inspection could be good. And humbly, what I would say is, anybody that wants to support that, find a rancher. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be our neighbor. Find a rancher where you're at and support that to-market business, because the to-market businesses are what are going to allow this thing to change. Because the stranglehold that the big guys have on the industry doesn't allow the industry to change because it doesn't have to yet.
Yeah, and so just speaking about you shipping through, do you go to all 50 states? Is it continental U.S., or where do you guys ship to?
We have shipped to 49 states. The only state we have not shipped to yet is Alaska. We've shipped to Hawaii a few times. That's really not a big issue. Believe it or not, it's cheaper for us to go to Hawaii than it is for us to go to Virginia, which is bizarre. But so yeah, we ship nationally. We've had requests for Canada, but I haven't decided to take on that paperwork nightmare yet. So yeah, everything within the states, a lot of stuff to Chicago, and it's really interesting to see how the things kind of shift and where they go. So.
Yeah, it's interesting the relationship we have with Canada, because the cattle can kind of walk back and forth, and sort of, so to speak, they get maybe fed up there and processed here, or vice versa, or something along those lines, and yet selling it across state line or Canadian international borders is, I guess, true. I had somebody send me some Canadian beef, and he actually literally had to drive across the border himself with the beef in order to ship it. He drove, 200 miles.
I don't think you're supposed to share that, Dr. Baker.
Well, I'm not going to say who it was. So. but anyway, I got some illegal Canadian beef sent to me or something like that, or potentially illegal. I don't know if it's totally illegal if you drive it across the border. I don't know what the deal is.
If you don't get caught, it's not illegal, right?
Gotcha. That's right. There you go.
That's what we used to say when we were kids. I don't know how I survived any of that.
So, what do you, obviously you've got, I assume, an unlimited supply of beef for yourself. I would imagine you'd be crazy if you didn't. But what do you find to be your favorite? What's your favorite parts to beef to eat?
One of the things I've really grown to love that not a lot of people order on the website, which is great for me, is the flap. That bavette steak, that lower sirloin, is outstanding. We do most everything here on a smoker. We've got a Gorilla smoker out of Michigan. Those things are outstanding. They're double jacketed, so you can run them when it's cold out. And, we'll do that. We kind of eat a little bit of everything. What's nice is everything we ship is vacuum packed. So if a package isn't totally sealed, we just put that in the Jeff and Kara box. So, yeah, the flap is really good. I've really enjoyed ribeyes, like all of us. And that's probably the hard part. We get emails probably weekly. Hey, can you send me a box of ribeyes? And we have to respectfully decline, because we can't just ship all the ribeyes, because then we have nothing else left, or everything else left and no ribeyes. I really like a good rib every now and then. We do some plate ribs that I really like, that you can smoke those, and those are pretty awesome. And I think our skirts are pretty good. I think you've mentioned to me before you really like the skirts.
Yeah, skirts of steaks are just, I think that's a hidden gem for people who don't know about those. Those are just incredible. They're just, I think they work well. I guess that's why a lot of people put them in fajita meat is I think where they're classically been used. But yeah, they're just, I'm about to, like I said, we got World Carnivore Month coming up starting tomorrow, and hopefully we get lots of people to join. But my carnivore diet as of late has consisted of dairy and eggs, so I'm going to drop all that for this month. I'm just going to be nothing but, I think I'm going to eat nothing but beef the entire month, every meal. Basically 2 meals a day, so it'll probably be 2 ribeyes for breakfast, 2 ribeyes for dinner, just repeat every day or it might be some short rib. I've been digging the short ribs lately, and I'll, whatever else I have in the freezer that I'll thaw out and cook. And I'll go with that this month. I've got some seafood out there in the freezer that I haven't unthawed yet. I've got a guy he supplies kind of wild caught, sustainably caught seafood, and he's going to come on and show us, teach us about that situation. So I was waiting for him to come on because he's got a chef that's going to show us how to cook this stuff well. But for the month of January, it's going to be just beef for me. And you said your little girl, 13 months old. You guys any plans on any more to help run the farm? You got to build a little built-in labor force with those kids, right?
Yeah, go for a basketball team, right? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're waiting to see what we decide. 13 months, we just got out of the woods. So she's just now to the point she'll play by herself and kind of let us have our coffee in the morning. So, going in and upsetting that apple cart that we barely got reassembled. I don't know that we're going to jump into that right away.
I've got four of them right now, and they're 2 years apart, all of them, 8, 10, 12, and 14 right now. So that's definitely a handful, I can tell you.
Well, the good news is, we don't have any neighbors within 1.5 miles of us in any direction. So, when they get to the age you can just push them outside, that's probably a better idea, right?
Yeah, they can play with the cows. Do you guys, I mean,
Emma's favorite word is moo.
Moo. I can see that. That's my favorite animal. My kids ask me what my favorite animal is. I say cow.
There you go.
It tastes good. Hey, do you live on the ranch? Is your home actually on the ranch? So you wake up every day and it's up to the cows, or okay? Because I know some people don't. They live.
Yeah, actually, this picture right behind me is out the back door. We were moving cattle one morning, and we happened to take a picture with Kara just going over the horizon. The silhouette you see there is actually Kara moving cows about 1/4 mile from here.
And how much? I mean, you said the financial side, and she's kind of the ag science side. But how much of the actual day-to-day working with the animals do you get to do, or have to do, I should say, or get to? I don't know, depending on how you look at it.
We both do all of it. So we don't have any hired people here at the ranch, especially when they're here on the place. Kara really loves her horses. That's her love and passion. So when she wants to go out and check cows, no problem. I don't mind riding horses. I grew up riding horses. So going out horseback when there's things to do is just kind of what we do. But I'm also the operations guy. Like, for instance, when a water heater freezes, or when there's construction projects or fence to fix or something like that. So we do all that on side of the ranch. So juggling all those different things with the beef company. Actually, it's really great when we get emails from people. They're like, hey, tell your team they did a good job on the boxes they shipped. And I'm like, well, you're talking to them, because Kara and I load the boxes and tape them ourselves every Monday. So yeah, it's very much us in the middle of it. So, we ship the beef every Monday. We load the boxes every Monday. We build the labels every Sunday evening. Luckily, we've got a lot of that optimized now, so it takes me about an hour to do all the labels. But yeah, well, I will say our babysitter, Emma's partner in crime, helps a fair amount on Monday's shipping. But yeah, it's that's where we talk to a lot of folks, and it's, beef goes out of fulfillment centers, and somebody works on my cows. It's a company out of, whatever state, and the cattle are actually 2 states over. We don't have that luxury. Our cows are out the back door.
Well, I guess I guess there's one of those things. If you want something done right, you do it yourself type of thing situation as well. But how many head of cattle do you have again, Jeff?
This year, Colorado Craft Beef shipped 100 head. So,
and is that up or down from years past, or what's the trend with that?
It is considerably up.
Very good. So and so you can do how much with the land you have? What do you think you could ultimately run if pressed?
The commercial ranch runs close to 5,000. So we're barely scratching the surface. Colorado Craft Beef is Kara and I's company, and then the commercial ranch is actually Kara's dad. So 2 separate entities. We end up helping her dad quite a lot. He comes over and helps us when we need more horsemen, but we're fortunate to live the way we do. I think everybody that listened to Kara's podcast would agree that I outkicked my coverage in the wife category, and I'm okay with that. So, it's been a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed working with you and working with the rest of the carnivore community, and, me heals, and we're happy to be a part of that mission.
Yeah, I failed to do this at the beginning. I should have, and I try to do this with anytime we get sort of ranchers and people that feed us to just put a thank you out there on behalf of myself, and I think the people in the community all appreciate the work you do, and the fact you're going to get out there in the freezing cold and do whatever the hell you got to do to get some water going. I mean, that's not glamorous work, and I think many of us are happy to sit inside our warm homes and heat up a steak in the frying pan and not think about all the behind the scenes stuff that goes with that. And I always say, because I don't believe the cattle ever tell you to go take a day off. I mean, that's my understanding. They don't tell you, we got it today, you guys are good. I mean, it's kind of a 7 days a week, 365 days a year job. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. How do you get a vacation?
Well, the standing joke around here is the cows still need fed on Christmas. So
yeah, they got to get fed on Christmas. Yep.
Yeah, you open Christmas presents after the cows get fed.
And how do you, if you want to travel or go on a vacation, how does that work? With a small operation, do you just have to beg and borrow some coverage for a couple of days, or how does that work for you guys?
The good news is, with some of the automation out there, if we're going to miss a week of shipping, we can usually schedule that. On the cattle side, we've got neighbors that'll help us because we help them. So it's a really traditional, you help me, I help you kind of mindset in the ranching community. And that's one of the reasons that we moved back to the ranch in 2015 was we thought we were going to start a family, and, we wanted her to be raised in that type of environment. So when the neighbor calls you and says, hey, I have cows out, can you come help? Or, hey, this is an issue, and I know that's what you can help with, we go help, and vice versa. So, very community oriented, and you get that ability to maybe get away. Some of that is how you structure your business. Some of that is optimization. It all costs money. So it's just, how do you want to live your life? And, laying in the snow, defrosting a water does sound miserable. But I will say that compared to my grandfather, my dad was born near Cheyenne. So all these guys that grew up doing this decades ago, before Thinsulate, Gore-Tex, and Carhartt, hats off to them, because I'll actually be pretty warm even though I'm laying in the snow.
Yeah, that's true. And I was going to ask you about the technology that's come along, and we've seen, like some of the electric fence, the thin, you can run fence, put up, temporary fencing pretty quick if you decide to rotate in certain ways. And, it's just, a lot of new technology that's making this more efficient and safer, and probably, better for you guys and the animals as well. Let's see if there's anything else. I think, I got you an hour at least. Hopefully it's warmed up a little bit where you're at.
I think it was 27 when I came inside.
27. Okay. Well, that's, it's almost a freezing, Where is, it's something Brooks saying, the Swedes said there's no such thing as cold weather, only bad clothes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the sign of a guy that's played in the snow a lot.
Yeah, exactly. All right. How do people find out about Colorado Craft? And just for the people in the community and listening, we do have a discount at MeterX for Colorado Craft if you guys wanting some of that. But do you guys have anything coming up for the new year? I know you guys said maybe you had a new year type of thing coming up.
Yeah, well, we're going to kick off shipping again next Monday. We took a break on shipping over the holiday because of FedEx issues and things like that, and just short weeks. So January 4th, we're going to start shipping again every Monday. We do have availability on products, so if you guys want to try something, I'd encourage you to do that. And we have a lot of people that want to buy quarters. We can't ship quarter beef across the country. We have a shipping solution for that. So that's one of the cool things we've been able to do is we ship quarter beefs I had a quarter beef order from Atlanta 2 days ago. So we can ship that stuff via FedEx. It is economical. If you've got a special request, reach out to us. I handle all the customer service unless I'm outside or something, and then Kara will kick it to me usually, and I'll get back to you. You can reach us on all the social media accounts. If it's Colorado Craft Beef on Instagram, all the handles are at Colorado Craft Beef. And, that comes to us directly. That's not somebody else answering the phone. My cell phone number's on the website. So.
Well, Jeff, thank you again for what you do. We're definitely going to support you. Hopefully we can get you a sale up in Alaska, because we want to get you to say you can hit all 50 states. And so that'd be
cool. I'd be able to work a deal just so I could say that.
All right. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks everybody. You guys have a great end of the year, and let's look for 2021 to be even bigger and better than, well, hopefully in good ways in 2020 than 2020 was.
Well, and on a parting note, if anybody ever wants to see, how the sausage is made, so to speak, and you want to come to the ranch, let us know.
Perfect.
So we've hosted customers for barbecues probably a dozen times or more in the last couple of years.
That's always that's a good selling point for sure. Okay, guys. I know we got some members that are at least local in that Colorado area. I know for sure. So maybe they'll make the trip out there. But you guys have a great day, and we'll see some of you guys tomorrow. Have a good New Year's and stay safe, and see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.